Sun breaks on a Monday morning where Jennifer was coming back from a night out. She doesn't remember much of the night but what she feels in pain with her clothes ripped and bruises on her arm with a black eye to top it off. Something terrible happened to her and she can't remember what happened. Thoughts ran through her mind, and she came back with one answer: she was drugged. All she knew that she has to get to her apartment before Mrs. Jackson walks her dog, Mr. Ryan leaves for work and her neighbor's kid Paul leaves for school. Jennifer gets to our apartment building, enters through the front door bypassing Mrs. Jackson's apartment and headed straight towards the elevator. She pushes the button to her floor to get off at. As doors open, Jennifer rushes down to her apartment. As Jennifer got to her door, she opened her purse to look for her keys. She heard a door creaking open and slam, and behind her, with the force of the slam, made her jump, and dropping her keys on the floor, she heard a voice from behind her. It was a neighbor's kid, Paul. Paul was a freshman in high school. He leaves around 6:15 in the morning and I get to school by 7:20. Morning Jennifer. Late night, Jennifer slowly turns to him, making sure he doesn't see her bruises and black eye, to face him, and chuckles a little and replies, "Haha, yes, I'm just getting in, so I'm off to bed. Have a good day at school." Paul chuckles back with her mark of having a good day at school. Haha, funny, good night, then see you after at the school. Paul turns and heads towards the elevator to leave the building to go to school. As Jennifer watches Paul walking away to the elevator, she turns back to open her door and gets jump scared by a clown. The clown was Mr. Rogers, who happened to her neighbor that lives next door to Jennifer. Mr. Rogers couldn't speak because he was a mute. Jennifer doesn't know all that much about Mr. Rogers. Well, she knew he moved in a week ago and he works as a clown to make people laugh and smile. Which makes Mr. Rogers the perfect person to talk to about problems, and she loves how to make her laugh to forget about her problems. Mr. Rogers looks Jennifer up and down. Jennifer feels shame at how she appears to him. Mr. Rogers grabs Jennifer's right arm and places his other hand on her bruised face. Jennifer looks at Mr. Rogers in the even though he can't speak, his painted face showed all of his emotions. Jennifer starts to cry. Mr. Rogers grabs Jennifer and gives her a hug, telling Jennifer everything is going to be all right. Mr. Rogers wiped the tears off of Jennifer's face, and then Mr. Rogers grabbed her keys to let her inside her apartment. So, no one else can see her breaking down in the hallway, Mr. Rogers sat Jennifer down on her couch, then went to the kitchen to make her some tea to calm her down. Mr. Rogers stayed with Jennifer until she fell asleep. He locked her door. As he was walking down the hallway to the elevator, he thought to himself, "I know who did this." Later that night, Mr. Rogers was coming home from work, walk off the elevator heading to his apartment. He heard someone screaming down the hall. Mr. Rogers stopped dead in his tracks because the screaming voice sounded familiar. Mr. Rogers' stare down the hall, he saw Jennifer's boyfriend pounding on the door, screaming and demanding her to open. Mr. Rogers stood in the shadows at the end of the hallway watching the violent scene of man versus door. As he continues to pound on the door, Mr. Rogers looks on with a hateful look. Jennifer's boyfriend pounded on the door till he felt like he was being watched. He turned his head to look down the hall, but there was no one there. He stopped and faced towards where the elevator was located to see if someone was lurking in the shadows of the dark hallway. With the feeling of being watched, he punches the door one last time, ends up screaming, "I'll be back tomorrow, bitch." He walks into the darkness towards the elevator. He hits the button before he enters. He turns around and takes one last look to see if anyone's there. He saw no one, walks on talking to himself, "This place is freaking creepy." As the elevator doors were closing, Mr. Rogers was at the other end of the hall watching him leave with a hateful look. Mr. Rogers was about to knock on Jennifer's door to see if she was all right, but he stopped, because he heard her crying inside and that hateful look turned dreadful. Mr. Rogers knocks on Jennifer's door, but she doesn't answer. He thought she was too terrified to answer. Mr. Rogers took off his backpack, opened it to put out a clown horn and squeezed it twice. That's his way of letting Jennifer know it's him. Mr. Rogers stood in front of the door till Jennifer slowly opened. When Mr. Rogers saw Jennifer's face covered in tears, he grabs her and gives her a hug. Then with a kind motion Mr. Rogers took Jennifer by the hand, leading her out of her apartment, closing the door behind them and headed to his apartment. He watches on as Jennifer sleeps. He heads back to the couch and wonders what he can do. He heard a noise coming from the bedroom where Jennifer slept. She walks towards the room but doesn't enter. He just looks in and sees a frightened woman. Mr. Rogers watches Jennifer as she cries in her sleep. Right then and there Mr. Rogers made up his mind. Standing in the darkness of his apartment, a red smile painted itself across his face. Next day. As he said, Jennifer's boyfriend returned the next day, pounding on the door trying to get Jennifer's attention. Jennifer wasn't in her apartment, she was in Mr. Rogers sleeping peacefully, but Mr. Rogers was standing inside Jennifer's apartment staring at the door. Every time he hits the door something inside Mr. Rogers was trying to break out. Every word he speaks feeds what's growing inside, and every insult strips away Mr. Rogers' humanity. After 5 minutes, Jennifer's boyfriend beating the shit out of her doorstop. Mr. Rogers slowly and quietly walked towards the door, placing his hands on the door, looking through the peephole. Seeing Jennifer's boyfriend taking a shot of liquid courage. With one last fuck you and kick to the door, Jennifer's boyfriend walks away and heads towards the elevator. Mr. Rogers places his head against the door with anger and rage flowing through his blood. Something inside breaks free. Mr. Rogers walked towards the window stairs outside until Jennifer's boyfriend exited the building, watching him walk away. Mr. Rogers stares at Jennifer's boyfriend as he walks away further. Mr. Rogers places his right hand on the glass and smiles. Jennifer's boyfriend was walking home till he received a text to meet at the old abandoned fun house. The place was an abandoned carnival, and smack down in the center what is the abandoned fun house. He received another text telling him to go inside the fun house and find me. He walks inside using his phone as the only source of light. Jennifer's boyfriend follows the path through the fun house till he hits the Hall of Mirrors. There he sees a figure standing in the middle of the Hall of Mirrors with a source of light coming from a phone. He received another text from Jennifer, "Come find me." After receiving that text, Jennifer's boyfriend wandered around the Hall of Mirrors trying to find the right path to the center. After running from one dead end to another dead end, he finally reached the center of the maze, but Jennifer was nowhere to be found. The phone in his hand was going off. He was receiving another text. He raised phone to unlock it. It was from Jennifer. The look on his face went cold. The text said, "You found me." He screamed at the top of his lungs, screaming, "Don't fuck with me, bitch. When I find you, you're fucking dead. Show yourself, you fucking bitch." Right before he was going to say something else, he heard a noise in the distance. Freaking out, he turned to where the direction of the sound came from, dropping his phone. Losing the only source of light he had till he received another text message. He bends down to pick up his phone, and stares at the screen. It was another text from Jennifer. With fear setting in, he stares at the screen and swipes his finger to unlock it. The fear he felt turned terrifying black. Jennifer's text read, "You found me. I'm standing right behind you." He hits the reply button and sends a message of his own saying, "Where are you?" again. As he hits the reply button, he hears a bing coming from behind him. He slowly turns around, hoping to see Jennifer, but all he saw was the light of the phone that someone was holding. He screams, "Who are you?" to the dark figure standing in the shadows. The man in the shadows slowly walked out, only showing most of his body, not showing his right arm. He screams, It's you. You're that fucking clown that lives next door. You're the one fucking with me." As Jennifer's boyfriend said that, Mr. Rogers just smile. That pissed off Jennifer's boyfriend, and he ran at Mr. Rogers. With speed and strength, Mr. Rogers hits him in the chest. Jennifer's boyfriend hit the ground hard, and as he was about to get up, he noticed something shiny aimed at his face. His vision came into focus, and he saw that Mr. Rogers had an axe aimed at his face. As he was about to speak, with speed and strength from Mr. Rogers, he smacked Jennifer's boyfriend across the jaw with the back of the axe. Breaking his jaw, he let out a wicked scream, coughing and spitting out blood. Mr. Rogers looks on as he tries to crawl away. Mr. Rogers grips the handle of the axe with both hands and with speed and strength slams it on his back with the back of the axe. Forcing him to kiss the ground, Mr. Rogers walks over and bends down, grabbing his hair with his hand, lifting his head. Mr. Rogers leans in and whispers into his ear with a dark, disturbing voice, "Did you enjoy the show?" His eyes widened because of all the crap, all the abuse, all the bullshit, and all the pain he did to Jennifer. At the end of all, he always said, "Did you enjoy the show?" Mr. Rogers slams his head to the ground. Mr. Rogers gets up, it looks down, he just stares at Jennifer's boyfriend. Then Mr. Rogers stares at the axe in his hand, then looks back at Jennifer's boyfriend. Their eyes met without saying anything. Mr. Rogers said to him, "Choose a god that you think will be fair." Is the Rogers group the axe handle with both hands, raises it above his head with no words, just with one motion. Justin Rogers said goodbye by slamming the axe on the ground with Jennifer's boyfriend lies. Later that night, Jennifer was coming home from celebrating her birthday, and as she got off the elevator, she saw a package in front of her door. It was wrapped like a present. She got close, there was a card on top of the package. Jennifer picked up the card and it only said 3 words, "Happy birthday, Jennifer." Jennifer picked up the package, took out her keys to open her door. As Jennifer entered her apartment, She put the package down on the coffee table, then headed to the kitchen to grab a knife. She sat down on the couch and just stared at the package, wondering who sent it and why. Jennifer picks up the knife and starts cutting the package open to see what's inside. After she was done with the knife cutting off the tape, she opens the box and looks in. With a frightening jumping scare, Jennifer closes the box and pushes it off the coffee table. With a terrifying fear of what she just saw, she takes her keys and heads out the door and runs down to Mr. Rogers's apartment. Jennifer knocks and bangs on Mr. Rogers' door until he opens. Mr. Rogers opens the door and Jennifer wraps her arms around him as she was shaking in fear. Mr. Rogers grabs Jennifer by the shoulders and looks into her eyes, knowing that she was scared. Mr. Rogers decided to let Jennifer into his apartment. Jennifer felt safe when Mr. Rogers was around. Mr. Rogers stayed with Jennifer till she fell asleep. Mr. Rogers took her keys and headed out the door, walking down the hall to Jennifer's apartment. Unlocking the door and looking down, seeing the package that Jennifer pushed off the coffee table that he left behind, he picked up the package and placed it back on the coffee table. He opened the box and a red smile painted across his face because inside the box was Jennifer's ex-boyfriend's head.